Hello and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers who are looking to find their way into the creative industries. I am Dan Allen and I am joined by James Walker. How's it going?
I'm good, Dan. I am very good and I am ready to talk.
I am so excited.
It's another editor.
Ticking. I'm going tick tick.
And
part of me's gonna.
You're gonna explode, aren't you?
I'm going to go boom with excitement.
It's absolutely true. Because we're doing musicals. We're speaking to another absolutely stellar editor and with a real focus this time on musicals. Because we are delighted to be joined by Myron Kerstein, who is currently working on Wicked. So if any of you have seen the stage show Wicked, this is the film version. And Dan, you are...
Huge fan. I've seen it 3 times at least, possibly 4.
So this is a real fanboy moment for you.
It is. Big time.
And Myron has also worked on some absolutely fantastic other movies, including Tick, Tick, Boom on Netflix, In the Heights, which was Lyn Manuel Miranda's debut film as a director. He's also edited a number of other titles people may have heard of: Crazy Rich Asians, Garden State, Little Fockers, and Fame. So it's an absolute joy to get him on. Film musical. Do you feel musical, Danny? Ready?
Just about.
Feel it. So this is a really great opportunity to talk about something that actually we've been talking about at Young Film Academy, haven't we, Dan? Is maybe seeing if we can do a musical with maybe on one of our projects with our students. It is not easy, so we're going to learn some top tips and tricks, I'm hoping.
Absolutely. I'm desperate to make a musical as well, for the record. Despite my horror in my bones, I would love to do something musical, even like an indie way with guitars and stuff. It would be very cool. But yeah, anyway, without any further ado, let's welcome to the podcast, Myron. How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm honored and I'm really excited to talk musicals and other great, tips and journey of my career in editing and share it with your listeners.
Oh, well, thank you for taking the time to give back in this way. So maybe we'll start off, Myron, by giving us a sense. Are you musical yourself?
Well, if you ask my ex-wife, she would say no. Yeah, she doesn't think I have any rhythm, but so in high school, I picked up the drums and the saxophone, and I was in like marching bands and like just sort of, small little orchestras, high school orchestras. And I at some point I needed to choose, in America, sometimes you have to choose like what direction you need to go in. And because we had things called electives, and so I chose art and more fine arts rather, and so I started painting and drawing more, and sort of left the music behind. But I've always had a love for music. I've always loved musicals growing up. Remember one of my first impressions as a kid was, of course, The Wizard of Oz, but also films like The Music Man and these old, films like Grease and Purple Rain and John Hughes films. So all those things sort of went into my little brain at the time, and then here we are.
Because I think you mentioned rhythm, and I'm struck by, maybe we'll start with that sequence, the beginning of In the Heights, like the opening number of In the Heights, which I'm struck by actually reminded me a little bit of Dancer in the Dark, the Lars von Trier movie, in terms of all of those kind of things that are within the factory in that case, or in this case, the sprays and the shutter doors coming down, that there's so much cutting to a rhythm. I mean, literally the action and the actions of the actors have to hit a kind of rhythm. And that must be such a technical editing thing, which seems very different from a lot of other musical numbers I've seen. Maybe talk us through how did that happen? How did you approach all of that sort of kinetic, rhythmic, actual action that had to match the music?
Well, first of all, whenever I start any project, I'm pretty overwhelmed. I'm like, where do I start? It's literally a blank page. The good news with working with Jon Chu is that he gives me a lot of freedom to explore. But in that case, in some of those sequences, there was a lot of construction that I kind of knew what the plan was. He doesn't tell me what the plan is. And sometimes he'll say, do you want to know what the plan is? And I say no. And the reason is I want to be really fresh to the footage, and I want to see like what I might come up with. And so when I start to see like there's a certain construction or rhythm to the way the shots are being laid out or to me the day before, then when I put it together, like, okay, this sort of feels like it's going to go with, and sometimes there'll be things like a backing track that they played on the day to pre-record, which we can get more into in a second. But I start to construct these sequences as if I'm finding a bunch of found footage on the street and putting it together and then starting to create rhythms out of it, and seeing if that works with the storytelling, because the storytelling is always the key. It's like, if we're not telling a story with the footage, then it doesn't matter what the rhythm is. Once I'm starting to tell the story, then I can start saying, well, how can I use rhythm or pace? How do I, place one image in front of the other to reveal something? How do I start to grow into a song? In the case of this song, it was like it's like a 9-minute sequence, which actually took us 7 months to do, to edit. And the reason being is that it was shot over the entire shoot, for one. These little pieces of bopping around Washington Heights, but then there was a lot of footage missing, and that footage we started using like archival footage and other things to sort of paint the picture of Washington Heights, and then we came back and shot that stuff later. But all this to say, like it's just a long period of construction of first you have Usnavi waking up in the morning. Actually, first you have him in the Dominican Republic, and he's talking to his kids. And initially, he's sort of like the first beats are like literally with his, knocking on the crate. And then that beat starts to turn into him waking up in the morning. And that beat starts growing into him, spraying off the side, or someone spraying off the sidewalk. And then, some of the things we like to do is also like stop songs. Jon and I like to stop the songs, like kind of wake up the audience and like wink at it. And, in that case, he steps on the sewer cover. And then and you see that there's gum on his shoe, and then we're like, okay, now let's like treat that like a record scratch, and so then he record scratch it, and then we start up the song again, and so it's all that sort of playfulness that starts with that initial like, okay, the streets are made out of music is the tagline of that movie, and so we were trying to like create rhythms with things in the bodega or on the street itself, and then some of that again is construction, and some of that is us finding the rhythms with the footage itself. What was such a joy of that all coming together is like it is a real picture of Washington Heights, so you're not losing the what we're trying to do there, which is to introduce the audience to this place. And also, we don't want it to feel like a music video where it's just a bunch of random images like put together. We want to be able to tell a story. We want to be able to involve the audience. But yeah, to work on something that long, to like, I remember some things have to be. Jon wanted it very syncopated. Like having the bodega coffee maker turn on a certain beat, or him flipping like literally just a rag in his hand, and at first you're sort of like, okay, I don't know how any of this is supposed to work together, and then slowly but surely you start to finesse, and it gets more sort of tight and more sort of on the beat. Sometimes we also like to try things that are not on the beat or not like sort of I have a tendency of trying not to cut on the beat or trying to like make sure that the storytelling, the images are sort of dictating, and the performance, most of all, the performance is dictating how I edit.
Is that so that the visuals, they get to be the thing on the beat? So someone hitting something, so that's what's on the beat. So are you then trying to operate between the beats, if that makes sense, or are you, or is it even, or is it less precise than that, or
it's very imprecise. It's very like oftentimes it's a feeling of like where I feel like where I should be cutting on somebody versus a beat or something that the music is dictating. It's a feeling. It's what I think is this what the image is telling me to cut to from a story perspective. And I know that's really hard to wrap your head around. The biggest misconception about cutting a musical is that you would cut it any differently from any other movie. And so when I first approached the footage, I literally look at it often in a screening room. Like I'll have the production build a little screening room for me, and I'll watch it without having like my keyboard around me. Sometimes I'll have a laptop with like a spreadsheet for notes, just to take notes. And I don't do markers. I don't do anything that sort of is like editing. It's more about just letting the footage wash over me. And if it's something that feels like is something that makes me laugh or cry, or is just like a beautiful image I need to hold on to, like I make a note of that. And then later I start selecting all that footage meticulously and say, this is going to go into the film. I don't care if it falls in a beat or not. Like this is about, what's moving me in the moment, or what's telling the best story, and how can I manipulate it after that. So I start to try to forget the music and let the rhythm of the scene tell me where to cut, not so much the music, if that makes sense.
And so, can I ask, when you watch rushes? So this is the first time that anyone's seen the stuff that's come off the set. Now, obviously, what are you actually listening to? Are you hearing the kind of what the music that they're playing on the set? Are you watching it with no music at all? Like, just from a human perspective, what is that? So you're in this screening room, they're playing you the footage, but audially, what are you hearing?
Yeah, so sometimes I'm hearing the pre-record that they're lip syncing to. In both in Heights and especially on Wicked, there was an incredible amount of live performance. So I'm hearing live singing with a backing track, instrumental backing track that's being played usually in their ear. And the reason why they play it in their ear is that way it doesn't bleed in with the music, and we can use any live take clean, And so, but when I hear it for the first time, often the mixer has mixed like a version of it together. That way I'm hearing both the instrumental and the live vocals play together for the first time.
But yeah. Is it sort of what I would call a bad? Is it like a bad audio version? Totally. I mean, so yeah. In some ways, your brain's having to kind of do this work of going, it sounds dreadful, but I can see it's going to be great from the visuals. Are you having to do a bit of that as you go?
Totally. I mean, again, when you're dealing with thoroughbreds like Cynthia, Erivo, and Ariana Grande, you're not really hearing bad versions. You're just knowing that yeah, you're almost every version is an amazing version. Another thing that we do often is because they're like jazz, musicians, is that instead of a backing track, there's live piano being played alongside of them. So they have a pianist basically on set at all times. They never go away. So they're right next to the playback person. And if somebody like Ari or Cynthia want to just be off the grid, the piano is kind of feeling the way with them. And so the idea is that they don't need to worry about how things are in rhythm, or so we can feel it along the way together. And so when I'm cutting that's could be really interesting because they may do something a different way on a different take, or The live piano might be playing different. And again, like the live piano is separate, so I might be mixing and matching 40 takes of a performance together with a live piano from 40 different takes and trying to put it all together, knowing full well, again, yes, my brain has to say, okay, eventually it's not going to be live piano, it's going to be orchestration. And it's going to be, an 80-piece orchestra playing along with Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo or Anthony Ramos. And you have to do a lot of, your job as an editor is to do a lot of, imagining. And so you have to sort of go there right away that this is going to be this beautiful, lush number with these beautiful vocals.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And whilst we're sort of talking about some of these mechanics, I think for some of our young listeners, it would be really useful just to talk about the mechanics of how a musical is shot. And I'll contextualize it by saying we have a project at Young Film Academy called Project Paradiso, where we select 24 of our best students each year and we take them to Sicily. And they make a film. And then the idea is that plays on the international festival circuit. And it's been very successful to date. And we're just currently in the middle of a new project now. And one year we've talked about trying to do a musical, and that really does feel like a very, very hard thing to do. So can we just talk us a little through, like, if we were on set, what would we be looking at, and what are we hearing in terms of, has the music been, I suppose, pre-recorded by the performers and everything, so that it's being played back and they're lip syncing along? You mentioned there's this live piano element. Like, how does the mechanics of that work?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you picked something so easy like a musical to possibly make, because
we haven't done it yet, Myron. We're not sure.
I highly recommend it, because it is the hardest genre to work in. But once you sort of crack it, it's really satisfying, because there's so many moving pieces when you make a musical. But yeah, oftentimes the starting place is a pre-record of a song that may be in a scene. And so that pre-record is laid down, weeks, months later. And then generally what happens is there's the old school approach, and this is how they used to do every music video, which is just play it out into the theater. So people would literally lip sync to something that's just being blasted with speakers, old school wise. And you could just lip sync it and then, call it a day. As things gotten more complicated, they would use things like time code, and time code would be striped next to the song, and that would represent sort of a place in the song every time you see the time code, and that's generated back into the Avid or the whatever cutting software you use. Then you could find a place in the song. Then what happened is they started playing back in things like little earpieces. And that the reason why they did that is it allowed the ability of the actor or the artist, if they chose, to then sing live vocals on the day. So they could have literally the backing track or even their own singing in their ear, and they could lip sync to that, or they have the ability of singing live vocals, and those could be recorded clean by the production mixer. And so those are sort of the basic building blocks of how you shoot. And then otherwise you're literally doing something the same way you would shoot any other scene. You might have a wide shot with all your actors together, or you might have little pieces. Literally, you could have somebody like lifting a can to the backing track, or you can have somebody flying through the air, and they wanted something coordinated to maybe a way that a certain line of a song might happen. So, but you could have 20, 30 setups, 10 takes, multiple camera. In my case, I might have 3 or 4 cameras being shot at once. And so on Wicked, for example, it was like 200 between the two movies. We had 250 hours of footage, and that is for that scale, we needed that, but also you could see all the choices I have in the performances, the camera angles, the live takes. It was pretty monumental.
Fascinating, because just managing that amount of footage, right? Eddie Hamilton, the editor of Top Gun Maverick and Mission Impossible films, I remember Eddie talking to us about a helicopter chase scene in which I think it was Mission Impossible where yes, it was Mission Impossible, I think, where they had it was a 9-minute sequence, and I think they recorded, it was 9 hours of footage of helicopters, and he talks about how he eventually put them in bins, helicopters moving left to right, helicopters moving right to left, because he wanted to be able to have all this. And I suppose I was wondering, with dance sequences, do you have to almost bin them in a similar way of kind of that particular move is covered by that particular thing, and you almost put them in bins according to those? Is that how it works?
Yeah, anything you can do to organize or procrastinate from cutting this. But no, oftentimes I would break up, let's just say there was the dance number in the Heights. There's just a big one inside a club, and I wanted to break it up in different sections, or the big pool scene with Plus and CFA. There was a lot of sections, and so I would literally kind of arbitrarily start making bins or sequences that just said section 1. Girls on the platform, and so I would just make selects just for that section, and then I might have or I would say section 1 reverse shot of guys reacting, and the reason why I did that was to build up almost like little mini scenes that I could sort of be less overwhelmed by all the footage. Otherwise, it'd be just sort of throwing a bunch of stuff in the air and seeing where it came down. I had to sort of organize in a way that I made sure that I could handle it. Literally, I'm working on something for the second movie of Wicked, and there's probably 7 or 8 bins of just footage of one scene. I was like, okay, I'm just going to start breaking it down to the essentials, which is what is the shot that moves me, what's beautiful, what do I think might tell the best story, and I could just. That's one tiny little micro scene, and by breaking down giant musical numbers the same way, I can just make it more manageable. And then when I go back to recut those things, I also know where all the shots are sort of laid out. I could go back to all my favorite shots of my main actor, and then reaction shots. Or if there was an action scene, I could say, okay, these are all the scenes with the principals. This is all the second unit shots. This is one shot of spoiler, there's a big balloon chase in Wicked. And so we could say, shot goes up, shot goes down, just little, not to spoil too many things, but just things that make it more sort of compartmentalized and more manageable.
So with that, does the coverage on Wicked, because obviously Wicked has got musical sequences, but then also has dialogue sequences, right, where there is no music playing and stuff. So is it fairly similarly covered across both? Because it sounds like even within the Heights that you're dealing with a lot of coverage rather than sequencing, where you just sort of have one particular shot for one particular moment. Because the director said that you could sort of find your own pathway through. Does it feel different when you have the footage from a non-musical scene versus a musical scene? Is there suddenly loads more footage to cover all the different elements maybe in a musical scene?
Generally, Jon likes to spray everything down, and so he shoots a lot of footage.
Yeah, regardless
if there's a. But they do tend to, once they have the bigger numbers, they do tend to turn on more cameras.
Yeah,
and throw in a crane and a steady cam and underwater shot or what have you. So, but Jon tends to cover things in a very similar way, whether it's a dialogue scene or or a big musical number. Sometimes a musical number might have a bit more of a construction to it, but again, I don't always know that construction ahead of time because I don't ask. And
do you use like multicam tools as well when you're sort of presenting and cutting the musical numbers? Because obviously a lot of modern editing programs have that feature to essentially view, 8 to 20 angles all at the same time. Obviously that's not going to work if they're doing that sort of live singing and they're not quite all on the same beat. But I imagine a lot of it, especially if it's dance numbers, they are all going to be on the same beat. Like, do you take advantage of those, or do you avoid doing that because it might make you treat it and see it differently?
Yeah, I remember when I first started cutting my first sort of musical type things. Like I worked on this film called Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist that had, like a band performing on a stage, and we had those multicam setups, or with Hedwig and the Angry Inch, we had those multicam setups. But I tend to feel like, when my assistants give me the footage, they'll give me a multicam clip, and they'll give me the 2 separate cameras right underneath of it. And I have a tendency of not using it at all. And the reason being is that I feel like it's a bit of a crutch, and it's a way of me cheating.
Yeah.
And so, and the real reason is I think I might miss something by actually having the ability to toggle so quickly. I do have the assistants also do these huge multi-group things where you can do like 20 different angles and 20 different cameras in case the director doesn't believe me, which Jon rarely does. But I could say, okay, you want to see every angle of every take of this bit? Let's go to it. We'll go there with time code, and I can literally toggle through all of them. And he's like, there, it's right there. I'm like, okay, fine, But I've even though I have this sort of tool, which is a really powerful tool, I tend to still not use it because I have a very old school approach, which is like, what is the footage? How does it move me? And why does it deserve to be in the movie versus just sort of, yeah.
I was going to say, with that mindset, though, obviously you wait for a clip to sort of have that effect, and you're like, okay, that's a powerful moment. That really moved me. I want that to go in the movie. Once you build that up, it's almost like, the Avengers of footage, right? It's like this is great at this is great at this. Do you ever find, though, that, it's another analogy for it's like a football team. You've almost got a team of superstars. Do they all work together? Is there a big process of being like, okay, this was really good, this moved me, but actually I need to prioritize this moment that moved me more, or is more effective for what I want from the scene? Like, how many of those get to end up in the final scene, and how much of it is actually just, doing what's best for the scene?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's really frustrating when you have the Avengers of an hour of selects, that needs to fit into a 1 minute scene, and you're like, where do I start? Why does this take have any more magic than the other? And the truth is, like, it's pretty arbitrary sometimes. You have to, as an editor, you have to pick, and you have to make a choice, and hopefully that choice is the right one for the movie. And then it's up to you to sort of exhaust those choices and make sure that you didn't leave something that was really amazing because you gave up on it too early because it didn't, fit into your edit or something for some reason. There's another really amazing scene where in Wicked, which is a very quiet scene between Elphaba and Glinda in this big ballroom, and it's a really quiet scene, and they shot these 10-minute takes from start to finish, and so it's like again 2 hours of footage, multiple days of just this moment in the movie, and every single take made me cry from beginning to end. And I'm like, where do I start? And how do I not mess this up?
Yeah.
How do I not mess this up? Because what is there is so raw and powerful, and every moment seems like the Avenger moment of editing. And here I'm going to rip it apart and say, okay, I know I've got all this footage, but now how do I start to find the essence of what is happening as a raw take that is not being cut up? And it's really, really difficult. It's really challenging when you have. It's almost better when you have a lot of bad footage and then you have one great moment, because you're like, okay, well, I guess.
Yeah, it's the problem of having it's an embarrassment of riches, isn't it? It's almost like it's all so good, and how do you even start to tell between great and really great and triply really great? And I mean, I suppose I'm interested. I asked this question to Eddie Hamilton a little bit about his, because there's a sequence in Top Gun Maverick which I actually watched on a plane. I mean, of all the places to watch that movie, what a terrible choice. But I had this moment of sitting on the plane. I told Eddie this, and I was sitting there, and literally at one point, it's the one where Tom Cruise does the mission. They're going to give up on the mission, and then they're all in the room being told that the mission's changed. And then Tom Cruise comes and does the mission himself to show it's possible. And literally, as he's doing it, he does it, and literally, I get up on the plane. I'm out of my seat, and I'm going, yes. Yes. And I looked around. Everyone's sleeping in this, transatlantic flight. And my wife looks at me like, what is going on? And I said to her, does he have, and I suppose the question for you is, when those musical numbers really work, they make me want to get out of my seat and I want to move. It makes me feel fantastic. Mm-hmm. Do you kind of know when you've got it, when you feel like that? Or realistically, because you're working on that sequence for so many days and weeks and things, do you kind of lose the ability to get that instinctive response?
I mean, sure, like anyone else, I've been working on Wicked for 2 years. And so, of course, you're going to become numb to it. But generally speaking, and maybe this is why I'm an editor, I tend to respond to things emotionally for quite a long time. And if I feel those goosebumps, or I'm really sort of getting into it, and I cry from the sheer joy of making these sequences, then, I know generally that I've got something there. And I've become more in touch of how things move me as a storyteller and as a filmmaker. And when I'm like, hell yeah. and if I get really excited about the sequence and I have that sort of continual feeling over and over again, or if I need a refresh with an audience to watch it through their eyes, which is really helpful for yourself and your director, and you feel that it's working, and there's an energy about it. There's a release to it. I'm feeling something visceral happening to me as I watch something, then I sort of know it's working.
And do you then,
And sorry, not to interrupt. It is like a muscle. It's like a muscle that you sort of train yourself to sort of, how am I responding to footage? Why am I responding to this footage? How do I manipulate the audience to feel the same way with that footage? And and it takes a lot of experimentation with how you are giving people information and how you're holding back information, and how you what is that release, what is that tension, and it's a muscle that's being worked over the course of your career, that you're getting more in touch with that.
I think that's such an interesting way of putting it, Myron, because a lot of our students at Young Film Academy, they struggle with the editing process. Not sometimes, just because they find the repetitious nature of watching the same thing multiple times. And I mean, we're talking about for 2 hours. I mean, we're talking about a very different thing than you're dealing with in your world. But these young people who's, they're not used to maybe concentrating on the same thing repetitiously for that long, they actually find that they become very quickly desensitized to it. They can't really see it. They're slightly switched off to it. And it's so interesting to hear you describe almost the ability to keep yourself engaging with the material over a long period of time and being aware of how it's affecting you emotionally and keeping open to that, that is its own muscle that I suppose is a very special skill for an editor working on the kind of scale of productions that you're working on. I've never heard it put like that before. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's taken me, nearly 30 years to sort of really get better at it. It's no different than the opera singer who's trained their vocal cords to work a certain way. And I think that the misconception is that editing is so technical, and it's for me it's my it's my medium of choice as an artist. Like, I want my DNA, the way I respond to the footage, how I pick and choose things to present to the audience to be like colors that I'm painting with on a canvas. And so it's literally my expression as an artist. So if I'm not in touch with all these things, if I'm not figuring out how to be in touch with how I respond to a certain performance, and then be able to manipulate that, use that to tell a story and move somebody in the audience, then I don't know what I'm doing here.
I think it is technical, Myron, partly because you guys always release your timeline videos, which are always, for those people who don't edit themselves, it's like the most bamboozlingly technical thing in the world. And you look at them, and you're like, holy moly! So I think that may be in part
I had
why
some
it seemed like that.
questions about the technical side of it, actually, in terms of your team, because I know you mentioned that you had a team of, is it 20 people on Wicked, which is. Mm-hmm. I mean, a massive amount of people. I assume your first film that you edited, you did not have 20 people. I imagine it was closer to either just yourself or you and one or two people.
Yeah.
How did that scale up?
It was just...
Sorry, you go.
Sure. Yeah. When I first started, it was literally me doing everything, and digitizing or actually cutting on film. Of course, I did a little of that when I started in college. But yeah, I mean, it's helpful to have worked on things like little indies where I had just my assistant editor with me, and maybe an intern or a trainee or a PA. But then working on a scale with like Wicked, where I needed multiple VFX editors, needed multiple assistants, I needed multiple music editors. I knew if I built a really good team that could support my work, then if there was a deadline or if the footage was too much, when you get, 3 to 10 hours of footage the day before, you need a good crew behind you that can process that and organize that for you. And if you don't have that, then it all falls apart. And if I don't have a good VFX editor, saying these are the pieces that you may want to consider using, and or have you considered using this shot, or do you want to create a shot and what that shot might be. If you don't have this team of really experienced people behind you, then it all kind of falls apart. And what it really meant, the first thing I said to my first assistant, this amazing, talented editor in own right, Laura Cacciuni, I said to her, we need to build a really great team in England when we shoot it, because we were there for 8 months. And then when we come back, we need to build another team to get us through the post-production process. And I said, they have to be really great at what they do, and they have to be really nice, because otherwise we're all going to kill each other. And we did it. We built 2 amazing, incredible teams that help support what Jon and I were doing. What's also important to me is to be a good manager of that team, and to be a cheerleader of that team, and to be a good captain and a good boss. And so I've tried more over the years to be sort of a bit of an inspirational figure to the people who are under me, but also try to like actually give them tasks and keep them from going crazy, or make sure I don't throw too much at them too quickly that they can't handle. And so all those things have become really important to me, almost as much as the job itself. Because if people have a horrible experience and I'm not a good team leader, like I really feel like that just makes for a bad couple of years for everybody.
Yeah. And can I just ask about working with Lyn Manuel Miranda? Because I think that when you did Tick Tick Boom, that was his directorial debut. Obviously he's done tons of amazing work, including Hamilton and many other things on stage, etc. But in terms of working on film, that was his debut. Did you find that therefore he relied more on you because of that? Was that relationship slightly different because it was his first movie? How did you find that?
Well, definitely the stakes were high with Lyn because I knew it was his first film. And it's interesting because so there was another editor, this amazing editor, his name is Andy Weisblum, who started the project and had to leave because he cuts a lot for Wes Anderson and Darren Aronofsky. And so he had to leave, and we're still in the middle of COVID. And Jon Chu had said to me that Lyn may call you. And I said, for what? And it's like, did I do, the first thing I said was like, did I do something wrong? And he's like, no, idiot. I think he's going to call you to work on his movie. And I was like, oh, okay. So I agreed to work on the movie before I had even seen a rough cut of it, because they did have a rough cut of it. And I remember watching it and thinking, oh, I don't know if I can save this movie from itself. Like, I don't know if I like this movie. And the main reason was not that Lyn hadn't done an amazing job as a director, was that I was having a really hard time connecting with Andrew Garfield's character. And I kind of felt like the audience might have the same problem. So I was really, really worried because, an editor is basically the co-parent of every movie. And they are responsible to protect this baby with everything, everything you have, any tool in your toolbox. And you are really trying to shepherd this thing to the finish line. And so I was very worried because it was Lyn's first movie. Like, how am I going to get him there? How are we going to get this movie from where I'm seeing it to the finish line? And the good news about Lyn is he's used to the process of making things and workshopping things. Like both In the Heights and Hamilton, everything he's ever made has had to go through the sort of rewrite process. And he really understands that. And he wasn't, as much as we started getting feedback about the character and whether people like the movie, he wasn't dismayed. He was like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and let's do what we need to do to get us there. He didn't have the answers. He looked, I was like, I was practically living with him because I was in his, it was like height of COVID. And so I was in this bubble at the time, and he would say, "What do you got?" Today I'm like, "What do I got? You're Lyn Manuel Miranda. You've won the Pulitzer, multiple Tonys. Have been nominated multiple times for an Oscar. Like, what do I have?" But he was incredibly open to me tearing it apart and giving what I thought would help the movie and most importantly connect to it emotionally.
Did you go away and work on that, like a cut without him, and then present what you deemed to be a version that worked? Or was it a case of like working on sections?
Yeah, very similar from like how John and I work. You know, he gave me a lot of freedom to work, and when we meant go away, I was literally cutting in his house. So
you're just like, just don't come in.
He was
like a kid with their parents. Like.
Yeah, he was like, I need to go write some songs for Encanto. I kid you not. And I'll be back in an hour or two, and tell me what you have. You know, show me what you have. You know. And so
make it great.
Or, you know, sometimes I say, hey, I need to work on this for a little while. And he would come back and or we would work on things together, you know, and he gave me a lot of freedom to explore and then present. And sometimes I would present him something that he's like, okay, I don't know if that's the answer, but what do you think of this? And then he might go away and, you know, and then I would represent, or you know, we brought up the writer up to the house to work on some stuff, and it was literally like me pitching, like, okay, I'm tearing this all apart. I've got cards that represents new scene here in a diner because we want to meet Jonathan Larson in a diner earlier in the movie, because later in the movie it's way too late to meet him in a diner because that will humanize him. And then the guys would like, okay, they kind of scratch their heads like, we'll get back to, yeah, the diner scene sounds like a good idea, let's write you know. So there was a lot of like just open collaboration between myself and the writer and the producers and with the actors, and so everyone was game.
I think that's so beautiful. And so many young people, I think, you know, actually that's their dream of what really working at a high level will be. And it sounds like it is. I mean, that's an absolute dream to be in a house, working with Lyn Manuel Miranda, doing that stuff, him going and writing songs for Encanto. I mean, there's so many, that really is a dream come true. So I suppose before we take a step backwards for you to your teenage years, can I just ask, do you have a favorite musical yourself, like a musical movie or a filmed musical that in some ways has informed or inspired you? Is there a particular film or films?
Well, All That Jazz was a pretty, and some people don't really think that's a musical. There's a debate about whether that's a musical or not, but All That Jazz had a really big impression on me. I think I saw it in a movie. I think my parents took me to see it when I was like way too young. I think maybe I want to say like 12 or 13. And it scared the hell out of me. Because, you know, it's like Bob Fosse dying. But it made a real impression with me about how music and storytelling could be sort of fused together. And of course, you know, I've mentioned this in the past, that I was really, you know, my first impressions also were films like The Music Man, because I just loved the corniness and the sort of aw shucks sort of quality of it, the Americana of it. Of course, Wizard of Oz, Sound of Music, you know, films like Grease were sort of on repeat. Purple Rain was a huge one that made a huge impression in the 80s. And then, you know, music-driven films like, you know, romantic comedies like John Hughes films made a huge impression. So those all kind of seeped into my small little brain at the time. And you know, it's a real surprise that I wanted to suddenly make a musical one day after having all that sort of be influential.
Well, I think it's a great list for young listeners out there. Go see those movies as a great start, because many of them wouldn't have seen those. In fact, we've spoken to Sam Wasson on this pod, who wrote the book about Bob Fosse, which was absolutely brilliant. Talking to him about writing books about movies. So let's start to time travel back a bit as we start to move to a close here, Myron. So maybe can you give us a sense of yourself as a teenager? We talk a lot at Young Film Academy how there is no particular way. Everyone says, how do I get to become, I want to edit Wicked. I would love to edit, In the Heights, work with all these amazing people. How do I get to do that? And we always talk about how there is no set path. Everyone has their own. Maybe you can just talk to us about sort of what you were doing in those years, maybe what you were studying or interested in, whether it was relevant or not. And then how did things progress from you? Like, what was your route?
Yeah, I was a shy art goth kid growing up in the suburbs of San Diego. And I, felt like an outsider. I felt like a little, I just felt like a lonely artistic kid who liked to draw a lot. And when I was in high school, we had this really amazing art program, and we also had this really amazing technical architecture program, believe it or not. And so I was really interested in. Let me back up for 1 second. I was really interested in musically driven things as a kid, but I was really interested also in horror films and VFX. And so I was like, do I want to be a makeup artist, or do I want to be like maybe I could work in VFX of some kind, because I was a fan of like Star Wars, of course, being a kid from the 70s. And so when I started painting and drawing more, and I was really into airbrushing at the time, maybe I could be a matte painter. And I also drew these really photorealistic drawings of buildings. And so I thought that maybe I should go into architecture. And at the time, my art teacher's son, believe it or not, went to a school in Boston for architecture. And I didn't know what to do. I just wanted to get the hell out of California. So I applied to a bunch of architecture schools instead of art school. And I thought I was going to be an architect for like a year. And so I moved to Boston, and I quickly found out I didn't want to be in architecture, but maybe I could still be a matte painter, because I like drawing buildings, and maybe maybe there was something to that. So at the time, I had a girlfriend who had graduated from this big university called UMass Amherst, and they had this really great fine arts program. So I applied to there, got in, and I started doing. Unbeknownst to me, there was no such thing as a matte painting class at UMass. So I was like, I guess I just do art. And so I was like, okay, let's put that dream aside. I don't have matte painting or architecture, but I have art, because I still love to make art. And so I started doing printmaking and more collages. I had a real love for collages, which is picking up found things and putting together and making new pieces of art. Hang in there, kids. I'll try to thread this needle in 2 seconds. But then I started taking photography classes. So all these things that I loved as a teenager were starting to sort of almost kind of gel together. Like I had a love for filmmaking and visual effects, and then that was sort of related to architecture and collages, and then photography was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I could take photographs or like little narratives with photographs. Mm-hmm. And I was inspired by Cindy Sherman and Dwayne Michaels, who did self-portraits and did little narratives in their work. And suddenly I was like, oh, wait, I have a love for music. I have a love for putting random things together. And I was like, this kind of makes sense. And I'm not sure. And then somebody's like, maybe you should just make a movie. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I could actually do something with all these interests of mine and put them together into something. So my first loves of horror movies and musicals and, VFX and just making art and finding things and making new things out of it all sort of correlated into making a movie. And then when I found that editing was sort of a further expansion of that I started to gravitate towards that as well.
Nice.
Wow. Well, that's so many different interests, isn't it? Sort of colliding and coming, but still that essential impulse to be creative and just find a way to express an essential desire to make things that didn't exist before. And so many of our guests have said some version of that. And so, Myron, if we take you back in this time traveling exercise, what are you going to say to yourself? What little bit of advice would you be whispering in, say, 16, 17-year-old Myron's ear? If you could, what would you be saying to yourself?
Well, I always have the joke version, and then I have the real version. And the joke version is, whatever you do, don't do it. Go be a lawyer. Go be an accountant. But the truth is, what I would tell myself is like, don't do it unless you really want it. Like, don't pursue this career unless you really have to do it. And what I knew in my heart is I had to do it. I didn't have a choice, but I wanted to be an artist. And I wish somebody had whispered that in my ear, is you don't have a choice. This is what you're supposed to do with your life, is to make things and connect to other people through art. And hopefully you'll have a community who supports you, and hopefully you can make a living at it, but you don't have a choice. You are an artist.
Yeah.
And, but if you want it, you better want it, because it's not an easy road. It is the hardest. Being an artist is the hardest road, because I could throw a rock out of my house and hit an artist, like in any direction. Like, there's millions of us, and now everyone's making something. Content is everywhere. So you really, really, you can't want it because you want to be rich or famous. That's for sure. You got to want it because you don't have a choice, that you need to make something, there's no difference in an athlete that needs to run, or a baseball player that needs to play the game. You have no choice, because this is what you're born to do. And so I wish I had that.
Talking about an emotional,
yeah.
Well, I wish I'd had that. I mean, actually, talking about emotional reactions to things as they live, I got goosebumps as you said that, and because I really believe that same thing. If all of us could have had that affirmation that this was the only choice that we could make at that young age, because of course it's difficult to know. You never know. Is this the only thing? But actually, if that is the case, then what brilliant advice. Well, thank you, Myron, so much for taking the time to give back to the next generation. Thank you for taking the time to share. Thank you for all your wonderful, joyful, beautiful work that you put together and the things that you make. We're really, really grateful, and it's been wonderful to have you on.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
That was wicked.
I see what you did there. I see what you did. Well, it was. It really was.
It was. It really was.
Well, there we go. What a great chat with someone who's doing so much amazing work.
I know.
And I don't know where do we begin. I mean, one of the things I was really struck by is Myron in a house with Lyn Manuel Miranda, and Lyn Manuel was going off to write songs for Encanto and saying, "I'll come back in 2 hours. Make it better." Essentially,
I love that image.
Isn't it brilliant? Because it's sort of what young film academy students will be kind of familiar with. It's that sense of they might be at summer camp or out of our course or something where they're working on a film, and then they go, "Listen, I've got to go off to do this other activity thing. When I come back, can I have a look, see what you've done?" And you think that at a certain level, it's not going to work like that, and yet there is Myron at the very top level in a house with Lyn doing that. It's just super inspiring. And I suppose what came out of Myron so strongly, I felt, was another big heart, just a big-hearted person working and managing a team, leading a team. And I suppose that was something that struck me, is that I suppose a lot of people might not think of an editor as someone who has to be a leader necessarily.
Yeah,
but
it's not a recluse role.
Not at that level. It most certainly is not. You're managing a team, and you have to be aware of all those managementy things. People are in his team not bored, not sort of falling behind, not feeling they're contributing. You do all that people management stuff at that level, and also you just got to be a nice team player. It's what we say at Young Film Academy, right? You're going to be on a set or in an edit post-production environment for a long time with these people. Yes, you've got to be great at your job. Yes, you've got to be, do all the simple things and the not so simple things very, very well. But actually, you've got to be somebody who you want to spend time with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, because you're working long hours with the same people day after day after day. It only takes one, not nice person. That was my PG.
Yeah. Or just a bit of friction, or you just feel like each encounter is not a sort of you're not giving it. It feels like it's
a
sucking.
Huffer and puffer.
Yeah, huffer. We don't want a huffer and puffer, Dan.
A fun sucker.
And other ways of saying the same thing. But so I took that very much out of that. It was great to also hear, we've obviously heard from some amazing editors across the discussions on this pod, and each of them talk about, they often describe, don't they, the first time, and it's always slightly different, how they watch the footage for the first time and how they let it, or to what extent they start to analyze it, either not immediately. That's, I think, been a bit of a theme. There's a lot of them just talk about how they let the footage kind of wash over them a bit.
I think so, yeah. I feel like Eddie was saying that he was tagging stuff from the first sort of watch. I think most of he said his views were active views, I thought. I might have been misremembering. But
Eddie
I think
Hamilton on Top Gun and Mission Impossible.
Yeah, but I think but I think he was still trying to just take that in, as most people do, because it is about the effect it has on you, even Joe Walker was talking about that making the edits work is the least interesting thing that about his job. He was talking about it's how long you're holding on something, it's what you're seeing, it's the effect that has on you.
You're kind of like the emotion. I think I've really come to see you are the sort of almost like the emotional gatekeeper. I mean, that's what Myron talked about that movie. You're its guardian. He put it in a beautiful way, but you really are, because you have the power to turn to the director or the key creatives or the Tom Cruise or whoever it is on the project and just go, we are not engaging with your character or this character or that thing, however good it technically is and all that stuff. So you're having to hold on to that emotional reaction, and also how Myron beautifully described it as a muscle, the ability to sort of feel your reaction to the same footage and the same sequences time and time and time again over a long period of time, years, is like a muscle you build in the gym. That mere mortals like myself, I don't have it because I've never done it. Maybe I would never have it anyway. But I can't watch the same thing over and over again in small iterative variations and go, how do I feel about this? I mean, I'm quite quickly like, I don't know. I've almost forgotten how I felt. I don't know. What did I feel about it the first time?
Yeah, I feel like that's where, your empathy and your sensitivity becomes a tool and an asset. And I feel like, I've certainly said to directors that I've worked with, I've said, I understand what you want from this scene, but these takes and like the way it's currently constructed is not giving you that. It's not getting you the intended feeling, or it might be that it is getting them their intended feeling, but is that actually the right feeling to be aiming for the overall shape and structure of the film? It could be like in this situation where you need to care more for the characters. And I know sometimes it can be a matter of combing through the film and removing certain things that certain characters do and just removing all of those as much as possible to try and shape them in a certain direction, because they might come across the wrong way. There's lots of things that you're always looking for so that the film washes over the vast majority of people with the intended effect. But it is subjective, but it requires it requires a lot of connection to your emotions and a lot of empathy, I think, to do it really well.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's the connection to your own emotions. You're almost like an emotional divining rod. You know, those twigs. You know, the old folk. You know, you go across a field with these twigs, and when the twigs shake, they might be water type thing. It's almost like you're that for the movie. As well as doing an incredibly technical task, and especially with regard to musicals, right? You're having to do all that stuff of, have we got different dance routines covered in multiple different camera angles with so much footage? You don't become totally overwhelmed by it. You can kind of see the wood from the trees.
No, absolutely.
So interesting. I also had that, that sense of being rhythmic as well. The rhythm, we've talked about this. There's a rhythm to editing, even if it's not in a musical, and actually the joy of being able to edit with rhythm properly. Really going with that rhythm is it was beautiful to hear about that.
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. And just hearing about the way musicals are sort of constructed, I'm really excited to hear that they were doing the live on-set recording in Wicked as well, which I think it was Les Mis that they sort of did that on first. That was the first big Hollywood film that they sort of did that on. So because the whole of Les Mis is sung live on set, but it's interesting. It sounds like this is almost like a mixture.
That always sounds like one of those things they say it is because some of it is, and then a lot of it won't be. That's call me cynical.
You and I both know that I'm sure there was one or two lines they'd have to pick up, even if they intended it to. Intended to not. But I get the sense it is when you watch it. It doesn't.
Are you saying it's all slightly out of tune? That's what you're saying. That's what I know.
It feels raw. Like it really does match up with their mouth movements. That's the thing. Like, and what it was trying to erase is that whole Grease energy of. Here's how the film sounds before the song, and then suddenly the sound almost like there's like a hard cut to the pre-recorded track, and then the actors sound almost completely different with those studio vocals. It's sort of erasing that and sort of merging the two worlds of before song and after song. But I was surprised to hear they'd done it in The Heights as well, to be honest, just because that was a complete musical. So it almost. To me, I was like, why did they need to?
Well, I also had this thought that I didn't get to ask Myron, but I was thinking, I think he mentioned that they go, I think he used the phrase off grid, by which I took. Did you think that he meant they kind of slightly improvise? Because then I was thinking, my God, I mean, surely the one thing you need is for everyone to be on the same rhythm and the same song. It's like not to start adding lines to the tracks or stuff like that. That must be an absolute edit nightmare. Was my impression. Or did you think I misunderstood that?
Oh yeah, when they talk about the live piano and being
it's almost like they were like jazz musicians, that they were slightly kind of like riffing and improving. And I just imagine when you're putting a sequence of that complexity together, the one thing you kind of want is that it is that.
Yeah, you'd hope there's at least like a click track in their ear, wouldn't you? I'll be honest, that did give me anxiety. But I was thinking you might end up with a couple of moments where that's really nice towards the end of a song, where actually you can break rhythm before everything comes back in.
Yeah,
that was the only moment I could imagine in my head where I was like, that's useful. Everything else, I'm like, do you actually want to give them that freedom?
That's what I was thinking. It'd be like, no. In this moment, I need you to do this.
Doesn't mean you're going to have to retime it in order to use it.
Exactly. And I suppose the other thing was talking to him about a potential musical at Young Film Academy, and Myron was so wonderfully encouraging and very sweetly saying off air at the end that he would watch what we did and try and give it any sort of help that he could, which is very, very generous of him. But when he said it is the most challenging genre, musicals are the most challenging genre, and I thought, it's quite challenging anyway. But I mean, it really is, isn't it? It's because it's just so many different technical things having to happen, as well as all the performative stuff.
Yeah,
all at once.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it is a big challenge. James, I've got a question come in.
Let's hear it.
This is a question from Isabel, who's 15. Isabel wonders, I'm shooting a music video for my friend who's a musician, and I wondered if you had any advice on how to edit the music video. There we go.
Well, interesting. Well, I'm gonna bounce this to you because obviously you are the master editor here. But I think there's one thing. So was it Isabel?
Yeah.
That that actually Myron referenced the difference between editing a musical and editing a music video. He actually referenced that, which I thought was very interesting. That sense that, I mean, the joy of a music video is that you can kind of get away with murder, right? I mean, to some extent, from an editing perspective, the joy, it's a very free format, so you can cut between almost anything, and we're very conditioned that works, and it's very free. You don't, you see the beginning of an action, you cut out the middle of the action, you just cut to the moon, space, an ant. Doesn't really matter. You'll be fine. So I think that there is something really freeing, right, about a music video as a starting point, but that is very different from when you start to cut a kind of musical. However, I suppose there are different rules, and I suppose as well, potentially, and see what, Dan, you think about this, but you can kind of set your own rules. I mean, each of the musicals that Myron's worked on have very different rules, if you like, for how the musical element is sort of pitched within, and the style and tone. So I suppose you have your choice as well. You could choose. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think, I mean, James, when you were talking about you can sort of get away with anything in music videos, my brain immediately went to like those mirroring and kaleidoscope effects. You can just sort of throw them on.
Oh, so
my
MTV.
rule of thumb is you can throw any effects that's in like the pre-built effects of your editing program onto a clip in a music video. The one rule of thumb I would say is if you use an effect, use it at least 3 times so it feels like a stylistic thing rather than just something you randomly threw on one clip. Yeah. So if you're going to use the kaleidoscope effect, use it 3 times at least, and probably more. But my thoughts are, with music videos, they are a lot more free. I genuinely would try and set up like a multicam thing, which you can do in Final Cut. You can do in Avid.
Can you just explain to us a bit more what multi? Because you mentioned this with Myron. Just explain to those of us who are not professional editors, Dan, what is multicam?
Multicam is designed basically if you've got multiple cameras running at the same time, but you can sort of hack it a little bit. Where essentially what it will do, it's a clever system within the editing program where you can view all your angles at the same time and you can play them all at the exact same time, so you can do essentially a live cut, and by live I mean you're not cutting it literally whilst you're filming it, but it's a live cut once in the edit. So this could be the next day or whatever, so you're lining up, let's say, all 8 angles you've got of the band performing, play them all at the same time, and you can literally hit like number 1 on your keyboard and it'll cut to angle 1, then you press number 3 on the keyboard and you cut to 3, then you can press 1 again and go back to 1, all in real time. So literally within 3.5 minutes of playing back the song, you could have a rough cut that you really felt and you found some really nice edit points, and that will give you like a nice basis, and then you can build on top of that. I would recommend though, if you really want to take your editing to the next level, you do need to do the things that Myron was talking about, which is watching all your takes and really finding those special moments and lay those on top of your multicam track and be like, okay, I want to try and make this work because this is fantastic. I want to make this work for this moment in the song because this is fantastic. But then you can always fall back to the multicam, which is a way of being like, okay, well, what other angles do I have available to me? And it's not that you're going to necessarily commit to the angle you happen to choose at that moment, because it's really hard to take in 8 angles at once, but you can use the multicam window to see all 8 options and change the angle.
It's really
so
quick.
It's all about
way,
second and third pass. Yeah.
And it really is fast. We shot. I produced a shooting a Robbie Williams concert, and we used the multicam, and it was just. The cut became so much quicker because you're covering a long concert and you've got a lot of cameras rolling at the same time. And it was a way of not getting completely bogged down. I think the only technical thing, as I understand it, is you need to make sure, obviously, that your starting point is synced up across all of them. So whether that's a clapperboard or whether that is literally just someone clapping or whatever it is, because you need a sync point for all of the clips in order for it to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way you generally do that across all the softwares is you will use the studio recording of the song as an angle, and the reason you use that as an angle is because it will easily be able to find the song in the recording. Like you have to make sure that your video camera is literally recording sound. But obviously, if you just try to sync all the different angles, there might be lots of coughs and stuff that don't quite match up. But so I would always recommend syncing it to the actual studio recording, and then you'll have an easier time with the sync.
Yeah, which would also mean playing it live at the time, like playing a bit like Myron was saying, the old school way of having speakers playing the track at the point of recording 100%. Out loud. Because realistically, our students are not going to have little earpieces and all that groovy stuff, which is a lot of fun, like a special CIA agent.
Absolutely, yeah. So just blast that as loud as you can when you're actually recording it, and then you'll have the easiest time, and that's good for the artist as well. But yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Best of luck, Isabel.
Google multicam.
Go multicam.
to visually see what I was talking about. But that's the way I would do it.
And that, I suppose, to finish up, takes us back to kind of what Myron was talking about as a young person, as a kid. He talked about, actually, I really picked up that sense of collage. He was interested in collage, which I suppose, when you come to talk about whether it's music videos or musicals or actually editing in general, there is an element of collage. It's pulling lots of disparate things together to put them together into something that is greater than the sum of its individual parts, which is kind of exactly what a collage is, and that instinct. So maybe if you're listening to this and you find that rewarding and fulfilling, maybe you've got the beginnings of the DNA that might have you being the next editor of Wicked or In the Heights or all the amazing films, Tick, Tick, Boom, that Myron.
And lastly, I just remembered what Myron also said, which you should do on your music video, Isabel, is don't cut on beat. That's lazy. Someone strumming the guitar on the beat is more powerful, generally speaking. So you cut just before the beat, and then the image, you'll get to see the performer hit that beat. And it's often far more powerful, and the edit becomes more invisible. When you cut on beat, it's often a bit like, oh, look at me, I'm the edit. When you cut just off beat or between the beats, it allows the content, the actual visuals, to be the musical components. But yeah, anyway.
Great advice.
Thank you very much. Send us your questions, podcast@youngfilmacademy.co.uk, and we will endeavour to answer them on a relevant episode.
Can't wait. Well, pleasure, Dan. It was indeed, and can't wait to see Wicked when it hits the cinemas.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys soon. I mean, I'm going to be there like multiple times.
I know you will.
And that's part 1 this year and part 2 next year, I believe. Which is very exciting. Okay, right. See you guys soon.
See you soon.